In the quiet shadows of a rural town, a group of ruthless burglars thinks they've found an easy target, a lone barn, isolated and unguarded. What they don't know is that this barn isn't just any barn. It's guarded by a highly skilled former Navy SEAL and his pack of trained wolves, ready to defend their territory with lethal precision. What follows is a tense, tactical battle of wits, strategy, and survival where every move counts, and underestimating the enemy could be deadly. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Now let's jump in. In the remote outskirts of Gray Hollow, where the dirt roads vanish into dense woods, there stood an old barn, weathered by time, quiet, and seemingly forgotten. But appearances in Gray Hollow had a habit of deceiving. The locals spoke little of the barn's owner, a man known simply as Cal Becker. To most, he was the quiet recluse who sold firewood and fixed fences. They knew he lived with a small pack of wolves, rescued, tamed, but never fully domesticated. What they didn't know was that Cal Becker wasn't always a farmer. 20 years ago, he was Commander Becker, a legend among the Navy SEALs. His specialty, unconventional warfare, hostage rescue, and close-quarter battle. He led teams into situations where backup was a distant dream. When the mission stopped, he disappeared into these woods, far from governments, orders, and enemies. But the world has a way of finding men like Cal. Tonight, it came in the form of the Vargas Syndicate, a ruthless crew with a taste for high-risk thefts. They had been expanding their territory, pushing deeper into rural towns, stripping properties of anything valuable: vehicles, weapons, rare equipment. Intelligence said this barn was holding valuable tactical gear, old but still profitable on the black market. They marked it as an easy target. They never asked why such equipment would be stored out here. They didn't ask who guarded it. At 0200 hours, 3 unmarked SUVs rolled down the gravel path, headlights killed. 6 men, armed with suppressed MP5s and tactical flashlights, stepped out. They moved with confidence, but not precision. Mercenaries, not soldiers. Their leader, Damon Briggs, a mid-tier operator with a dangerous habit of underestimating rural folk, gave his final briefing. Quick in, quick out. Don't waste time. If anyone's inside, muzzle flashes first, questions later. Briggs had done this dozens of times. He believed in speed and fear, overwhelming force. But what he didn't believe in was caution. His intel said the barn was rarely visited, the owner long gone on supply runs. But Cal Becker was home, and he'd been watching them since they crossed the county line. Inside his cabin, Cal's eyes scanned a multi-feed security setup. Infrared sensors, pressure alarms, motion detectors, quietly placed around the perimeter. He tracked the syndicate's every step. Amateurs, he muttered, sipping black coffee. Beside him, his wolves, Kane, Rhea, and Ghost, stood alert but calm, their training kicking in. Cal reached for his comms. Alpha team, we've got movement. Positions. Static cracked, followed by a familiar voice. Mason, his old SEAL teammate, now the local mechanic and part-time lookout. Copy that, Commander. I'm 3 clicks out. On standby. Cal's lips curled into a faint grin. Retirement was overrated. Tonight, the hunter steps back into the field. His fingers hovered over a switch, activating silent perimeter defenses, spike strips, signal jammers, and most importantly, diversion traps. Let's welcome them properly. The first mercenary breached the barn door. A faint click. Too late. The overhead beam snapped, sending a weighted metal cage slamming into the entrance, blocking their exit. The wolves growled, low and steady. Cal rose, his voice cold and sharp. You boys picked the wrong barn. The mercenary scrambled, caught between confusion and adrenaline. The blocked entrance wasn't part of the plan. Damon Briggs cursed under his breath, signaling his men to fan out and find another way out. But it was already too late. Cal had spent years preparing this land, weaving defense lines like a tactician mapping a battlefield. Every exit funneled invaders exactly where he wanted them. One of Briggs's men, a wiry scout named Vance, moved toward a side door. The moment his boot crossed the threshold, a steel cable tightened around his ankle and yanked him skyward, suspending him like a trapped animal. He thrashed, spitting curses, while his weapon clattered to the floor. Briggs barked. Cut him down now. The team moved to assist, but Cal's voice echoed through the barn, crisp and amplified through hidden speakers. "You're on my board now. Every step you take, I've planned for it." Briggs scanned the rafters, trying to locate the source. "Who the hell are you?" "A ghost. The kind your bosses thought they buried." Briggs sneered, masking his creeping dread. "We've got numbers. You're one man." Cal's voice remained calm. "One man's enough. I've seen to that." With a sharp whistle, Cal gave the command. From the shadows, the wolves moved, silent, fast, terrifyingly coordinated. Kane, the largest, flanked left, cutting off the team's retreat. Rhea, smaller and faster, circled to the rear, driving the men toward choke points. Ghost, pure white, ghosted through the side, moving with surgical precision toward isolated targets. Briggs's team opened fire, but the wolves were trained to avoid direct lines of sight, weaving between cover with impossible agility. They weren't attacking to kill. Not yet. They were hurting. Panic set in. Briggs's second-in-command, a seasoned enforcer named Griggs, fired a burst at Kane, but the round struck the barn walls as the wolf vanished behind crates. In his frustration, Griggs stepped backward, right onto a pressure plate. Click! A flashbang detonated beside him, deafening and blinding. Griggs crumpled, disoriented. Cal watched from his cabin, his fingers dancing over his custom-built control panel. He toggled another switch. Hidden vents released a dense fog into the barn, smoke laced with a mild irritant, enough to blur vision and sow confusion. The mercenaries' comms crackled with interference. Their night vision blurred under the haze. Their coordinated formation disintegrated. Briggs growled, realizing they'd walked straight into a layered ambush. "Stay tight. Weapons up. He's just a guy with tricks." The barn's old loudspeaker hummed again. "You think this is about tricks? You broke into a house built for war." Suddenly, the wolves struck. Kane lunged, locking onto a mercenary's arm and tearing the weapon free. Rhea swept low, knocking another man to the ground before disappearing into the mist. Ghost circled Briggs, silent and calculating. Briggs swung wildly, the white blur always a step ahead. Cal's voice sliced through the chaos. "Leave your weapons. Surrender now, or we escalate." Briggs snarled, desperate to salvage the mission. He wasn't leaving empty-handed. "You'll have to kill us." There was a pause. Then Cal answered with deadly clarity. "Not yet, but you'll beg me to." Briggs's pulse hammered in his ears as the wolves closed the noose. His team, fractured, disoriented, and now separated, was no longer hunting. They were prey. Vance, still hanging from the snare, screamed for help as his teammates abandoned him, scrambling to regroup. Griggs, half-blind from the flashbang, staggered toward the center of the barn, his weapon trembling in his grip. Briggs forced his breathing steady. "Control the panic. Regain the initiative. Form a perimeter. Regroup at the truck. We push out together," he barked. But when his men tried to retreat, they hit another of Cal's layered defenses. Steel panels, welded with hydraulic locks, slammed shut over the barn's ground-level windows, an instant barricade. One man, Perez, sprinted to the rear service door, only to trigger a snap trap. Nails punched through his boot sole, pinning him to the ground. His rifle slipped from his grasp as he screamed in agony. Perez's comms buzzed with Briggs's voice. "Leave it. Push forward. Move." But the wolves were hurting again, driving them into blind spots. From his cabin, Cal watched the syndicate's panic unfold like chess pieces falling into forced checkmate. "Mason, I've got them boxed in." Mason's voice crackled through the comms. "Copy. Perimeter secure. Got eyes on their vehicles. Should I disable them?" "Not yet. Let them think there's a way out. I want Briggs to make the mistake." Cal rose from his chair and strapped on his sidearm. A custom M45A1, his old service pistol, worn but deadly. He clipped a suppressed submachine gun across his chest and slid a hunting knife into his belt. His wolves followed closely as he exited the cabin and melted into the tree line. Inside the barn, Briggs knew they couldn't hold this ground. "Vance. Perez. Get up. We're leaving now," Briggs growled. But Vance, suspended and panicked, had no leverage to free himself. Perez's boot was pinned deep, his screams weakening. Briggs scanned the smoke-filled barn and realized, "Becker's bleeding us out." One by one, he keyed his comms. "New plan. We punch out the east wall. Stack charges. Two of his remaining men pulled out breaching explosives and began rigging them to the barn's support beams. Desperation was a racing caution, but Cal anticipated this. As Briggs's men set the charges, Kane prowled silently through the upper rafters, tracking their movement. Cal's voice cut through the speaker again, colder now. "Go ahead, blow the wall, but you'll bring the whole structure down on yourselves." Briggs paused, sweating. "You're bluffing." Cal's tone didn't shift. "What do you think happens when you destabilize 80-year-old supports reinforced with stress cables? I engineered the collapse points. You might find the exit, but the barn will bury you." One of Briggs's men hesitated. "Boss, what if he's not lying?" Briggs's grip tightened on his weapon. "He is." "Push the charge." The wolves retreated as Briggs detonated the explosives. The east wall buckled, but just as Cal warned, the structural tension snapped violently, sending debris raining down. Support beams groaned. Half the roof caved in, burying one mercenary in a tangle of timber and dust. Briggs screamed in frustration, dragging his surviving man from the rubble. Cal's voice echoed again. "You were warned." Briggs's defiance faltered as he realized this wasn't a battle. It was an execution, one move at a time. Briggs staggered backward, coughing through the settling dust, dragging his last able-bodied man, Mills, toward what remained of the east wall. Perez's screams faded behind them, abandoned and pinned. Vance still hung helplessly from the snare, swinging slightly as debris crashed around him. This was no longer a mission. It was a slaughter. Briggs keyed his comms in desperation. "Extraction. Get the trucks to the east side now." Silence. He tried again, this time more forcefully. "Alpha Team, report. Where the hell are you?" A voice crackled back, but it wasn't one of his men. "Trucks are unavailable." Briggs's blood ran cold. The camera feed in Cal's cabin showed Mason kneeling beside the Syndicate's SUVs, calmly slashing the tires and ripping out ignition wiring. One truck smoldered lightly, a small incendiary charge having gutted its engine block minutes earlier. Mason's voice was smooth, almost mocking. "Your rides are scrapped now. Might want to call a friend." Briggs's eyes darted, realizing the comms had been jammed the moment they stepped onto the property. He couldn't call for backup even if he tried. "You're trapped, Briggs." Cal's voice returned. "Your men are falling. Your plan is collapsing. All that's left is your choice. Surrender or bleed out." Mills trembled beside Briggs. "Boss, we can't stay here." Briggs shoved him forward. "Move. Into the tree line. We'll circle wide and cut through the fence. He can't track both of us." Mills obeyed, sprinting into the woods, desperation choking his breath. Briggs sprinted the opposite direction, angling west toward the creek, hoping the water would mask his tracks. But Cal wasn't improvising. He'd already accounted for these contingencies. Kane shadowed Mills, matching his frantic pace with deadly calm. The wolf drove him toward a dead end, a natural ravine with a sheer drop, a kill box disguised by overgrowth. Mills skidded to a halt, panting, his weapon trembling as Kane emerged from the brush. Mills raised his MP5, but the weapon clicked empty, forgotten in the panic. Kane's low growl was the last sound Mills heard before the wolf lunged, bringing him down hard. No kill, just incapacitation. Controlled. Cal had trained them to stop, not to slaughter. On the opposite flank, Cal closed in on Briggs personally, moving through the dense trees with the same methodical steps that had once cleared compounds overseas. His suppressed SMG remained low, his eyes calculating each possible escape route. Through his earpiece, Mason's voice chimed in. "Mills is neutralized. Kane's sitting with him. Good. Briggs is mine." Briggs barreled toward the creek, his breathing ragged, ignoring the branches slapping across his face. His boots hit the water. He turned downstream, thinking the current would erase his scent and his footprints. But Cal knew the land too well. 10 meters ahead, Ghost, silent and spectral, blocked the narrowest point of the creek. Briggs raised his weapon, but hesitated. Ghost didn't move, just stared. And then, Cal's voice, closer now, low and measured. "You've got no play left, Briggs." Briggs spun, raising his weapon wildly, only to find Cal standing on the embankment, weapon leveled, steady. "You think you're some hero?" Briggs spat. "You're one man." Cal's eyes didn't waver. "I was never alone." Ghost snarled softly as Kane and Rhea emerged behind Briggs, completing the circle. Briggs's weapon wavered. His hands trembled. "You gonna kill me?" Cal's voice was ice. "Not yet. You're going to deliver a message." Briggs's breathing slowed, but it wasn't from calm. It was resignation. He glanced at the wolves closing in, Ghost in front, Kane and Rhea flanking from the sides. His options had withered down to nothing. Cal advanced, every step deliberate, his suppressed SMG still trained on Briggs's chest. His voice sliced through the standoff like a scalpel. "You came here thinking you were hunting prey. You're leaving as my messenger." Briggs gritted his teeth. "I don't run messages." Cal's cold smirk surfaced briefly. "You do now?" He gestured toward the ground with his weapon. "Drop it." Briggs hesitated, then reluctantly let his weapon clatter into the shallow creek. He straightened, but his stance betrayed the exhaustion and fear weighing on him. "You're going to tell Vargas this wasn't an accident," Cal continued, circling slowly, his wolves shadowing his pace like a tightening noose. "You're going to tell him Grey Hollow is off limits. No crews, no smugglers, no eyes on this town. He steps foot out here again, I won't be this generous." Briggs's jaw twitched. "You think he's going to care? You think you scare him?" Cal's eyes hardened. "I'm not here to scare him. I'm here to send him home in pieces if he's foolish enough to test me." Briggs weighed his pride against survival. In the end, survival always wins. Cal keyed his comms. "Mason. Status." Mason's voice came through. "Vance is cut loose, tied up nice. Perez is patched, but not walking. Mills is sitting quiet. They're ready for delivery." "Copy." Cal's gaze stayed locked on Briggs. "You're taking your men. You're leaving in what's left of your trucks. You'll tell Vargas this operation failed because he underestimated a quiet town." Briggs spit into the creek, defiant but defeated. "And if he doesn't believe me?" Cal's response was clinical, measured. "Tell him to send more." For the first time, Briggs saw it. The iron in Cal's stare, the scars of a man who didn't bluff, who didn't flinch, who didn't stop. This wasn't just a tactical win. This was a layered warning. Briggs turned toward the woods where Mason had dragged the remaining syndicate members to the tree line. Mason, arms crossed, tossed Briggs the truck keys. "You'll get two running," Mason said. "Barely." Briggs shot him a glare but said nothing, limping toward his injured men. As they loaded into the battered SUVs, the weight of the night settled on them. Humiliation, failure, fear. They'd tangled with something far more dangerous than they'd been told. A man who knew how to turn a battlefield into a personal trap. Cal watched them leave, his wolves standing by his side. Mason approached, shaking his head. "You really think they'll stay away?" Cal's response was a tactical certainty. "No, they'll send someone else. Smarter, better armed." He knelt, running a hand through Kane's fur. "Let them. Every move they make, we'll be ready." Mason cracked a dry smile. "So what now?" Cal scanned the tree line, the barn's battered walls, and the distant headlights vanishing into the night. "Now," he said, rising. "Now we rebuild. And we fortify." By dawn, the syndicate's battered convoy was gone, limping back toward the city, carrying their wounded and their bruised egos. But the scars left on Briggs were more than physical. His failure would ripple up the chain. In Grey Hollow, Cal and Mason set to work, repairing the barn's damaged structure with the same speed and precision they once used to fortify combat outposts. For them, preparation wasn't paranoia, it was protocol. "You think Vargas will act quickly?" Mason asked, hammering steel braces into the rebuilt supports. Cal wiped sweat from his brow and glanced at the upgraded motion sensors he'd just finished realigning. "Vargas isn't patient. He'll take this personally, which is good. Anger makes men careless." Cal's eyes narrowed as he reviewed his security feeds. He wasn't just expecting retaliation. He was orchestrating the battlefield for it. Across town, the local sheriff, Grace Harlow, arrived in her dusty patrol truck. She'd been one of the few who always suspected Cal's quiet life wasn't the whole story. "You've stirred up a nest," she said, stepping out, arms crossed. "I've got reports of syndicate vehicles scouting county roads. They're moving faster than you thought." Cal didn't flinch. "Good. I want them to come before they're ready." Grace arched an eyebrow. "You're baiting them?" Cal gave a slight nod. "Grey Hollow's the last stop before open wilderness. If they fail here, they'll have no reason to push further west." She glanced around the fortified barn, the upgraded surveillance rig, the new tripwires Mason was threading into the underbrush. "You're not planning to hold this place alone, are you?" Cal's expression didn't change. but his reply revealed the depth of his plan. "I'm not alone." By midday, 2 more arrived. Reed, an old sniper buddy now running a hunting lodge nearby, and Elena, a former combat medic turned veterinarian who'd been quietly helping Cal train and care for the wolves. Each of them knew why they'd been called. No formal briefing, no speeches, just quiet understanding. Reed glanced at the defensive grid on Cal's map. "You've turned this whole property into a kill zone." Cal traced the fallback points, chokeholds, and covered angles with his finger. "It's not enough to fight them off. I want them trapped. I want them cornered." Elena set down a case of medical supplies. "This is going to escalate fast. They won't just bring another cleanup crew. They'll bring shock teams," Mason added. "Heavy guns, maybe armored transports." Cal secured the final panel on the barn's side entrance. "Let them." For the next 12 hours, the team fortified. Reed sighted long-range fallback positions and plotted sniper angles. Mason set up improvised claymores with remote triggers. Elena helped Cal create emergency supply caches and reinforced the tunnels beneath the barn for tactical repositioning. And always, the wolves watched, alert, calculating, synchronized with Cal's commands. When night fell, a drone's infrared camera picked up movement at the edge of the property. Multiple heat signatures, multiple vehicles. Vargas had sent a real team this time. Cal's eyes hardened as he keyed the comms. "They're here. Positions. Lock and load." Mason's reply was sharp. "Let's make this hurt." Cal's quiet reply. "We don't repel them tonight. We erase them." The convoy moved in tight formation. 3 armored SUVs, a tactical van, and a light assault truck retrofitted with mounted guns. Headlights off. Communications encrypted. No chatter. This was not Briggs's reckless crew. This was Vargas's response team. The squad leader, Anton Rourke, was ex-Special Forces turned mercenary commander, a professional who knew how to execute. He didn't believe in intimidation. He believed in clean, controlled operations with overwhelming firepower. He stepped out of the lead vehicle, scanning the perimeter with military precision. His team immediately fanned out, deploying jamming equipment and disabling external cameras with pinpoint accuracy. "We sweep, we secure, we burn this place to the ground," Rourke ordered. His second, Keller, locked the perimeter. "Intel says he's using wolves for perimeter defense." Rourke smirked without humor. "We've got countermeasures for that." His men released sonic deterrents, low-frequency devices designed to disorient animals. They thought it would scatter the wolves, but they didn't understand these wolves. Inside the barn's tactical hub, Cal and his team watched the live drone feeds. Cal's face remained unreadable. "They're sharp," Mason muttered, tightening his grip on his rifle. "Not the usual thugs." Cal's voice was calm. "They think they're the hunters. Let's change that." Elena keyed the wolf signals, subtle auditory cues that overrode the sonic deterrents. The wolves held their ground, waiting for Cal's next move. "Let them breach the outer barn," Cal instructed. "We hit them hard at Phase 2. Reed's voice cut in from his sniper perch 100 yards out. "Got Overwatch. Targets spread thin. 2 on the north, 3 on the south. Main assault team converging on your position." "Copy. On my mark." Rourke's team advanced methodically, clearing the outer barn with textbook formation. The doors were breached with precision. Their flashbangs detonated in empty rooms. Keller radioed in. "No movement. He's gone." Rourke scanned the cleared space, his tactical senses tingling. "Too quiet. Too easy. Lock down the perimeter. Bring the van forward." As the tactical van rolled toward the inner barn, Keller's men began deploying thermal scanners. They were looking for life signatures. What they didn't know was that Cal's team had already rerouted the heat sources using misdirection units, filling decoy rooms with residual body heat from portable thermal blankets and chemical pads. The scanners pinged targets, false ones. "We've got 3 life signs northeast quadrant." Rourke's team stacked on the door and breached. Empty. Just thermal blankets and triggered noisemakers. From his control board, Cal activated the next phase. Execute. Mason triggered the buried charges. A row of hidden explosives detonated beneath the van, flipping it on its side and engulfing the front 2 assault teams in fire and debris. Reed's suppressed rifle fired in sync, dropping 2 syndicate soldiers who were scrambling for cover. The wolves surged into motion. Kane and Rhea split wide, flanking the remaining units from the fogged tree lane. Ghost streaked past the fire, disarming a panicked soldier with a precision strike to his weapon arm. Rourke hit the dirt, barking orders. Regroup. Establish firing lines. Kill the animals first. But his men couldn't find stable ground. Mason and Cal were pinning them with overlapping fire, pushing them exactly where Cal wanted them, into the inner kill box. Cal moved like clockwork, slipping between barricades, providing cover fire, and issuing sharp commands to the wolves. Weapons hot. Sweep left. Elena coordinated the wolves' flanking paths, her earpiece buzzing with rapid updates. Reed's voice crackled in. 2 down. Keller's limping, but moving south. Copy. Cal's voice was ice. Rourke's mine. Rourke, pinned and outmaneuvered, realized the brutal truth. This wasn't just a home defense. This was a precision ambush, executed by someone who had turned the battlefield into a machine. And the machine was eating them alive. Smoke and fire wrapped around the battlefield as the tactical van burned, casting flickering shadows across the barn walls. Rourke's team was collapsing, communications jammed, units isolated, their lines severed with surgical precision. He gritted his teeth, switching to hand signals for the 3 remaining soldiers at his flank. Regroup. Fall back. Punch a hole west. But Cal was already 2 moves ahead. Mason's voice crackled through the comms. West is blocked. Dropped steel panels 5 minutes ago. They're boxed in. Reed's voice followed immediately. They've got maybe 1 lane north, but I'm watching it. Cal's response was calm, layered with intent. Let them try. On cue, Kane and Rhea pressed harder on the east, applying relentless pressure. Ghost ghosted to the northern corridor, herding the fleeing soldiers toward the final funnel, a false exit that led them directly into Reed's crosshairs. Rourke's team didn't know it, but the only path remaining was the one Cal had engineered for them. In the chaos, Keller, the team's second, limped toward the north exit, pulling a disoriented rifleman with him. Reed watched them through his scope, his breath slow, steady. Targets in the corridor. Permission to fire. Cal's voice was clinical. Take Keller's wingman. Let Keller crawl. 1 shot. Suppressed. Clean. The rifleman dropped like a cut string. Keller, panicked and alone, hobbled faster, dragging his shattered leg. He was now the designated message carrier. Rourke's voice barked in frustration. Keller, hold position. We're pulling out. But Keller didn't answer. He just ran. Rourke's frustration cracked, but his discipline held. He shoved his last remaining operator toward the south gate, now his only perceived exit. Prep grenades. We clear a path. But the moment they sprinted toward the south corridor, Cal sprung the final trap. The ground collapsed beneath them, an improvised pit lined with welded rebar and broken vehicle frames, designed to immobilize, not kill. Rourke's last man disappeared into the trap with a choked scream, his leg pinned beneath twisted steel. Rourke rolled clear at the last second, landing hard, his weapon lost. And then the wolves were there. Kane emerged first, low growl rumbling in his chest. Rhea flanked left, Ghost circling the rear. Rourke's survival instincts roared to life. He reached for his sidearm, but Cal's boot pinned his wrist to the ground. Cal stared down at him, calm, steady, unshaken. You're good, Rourke. But you made one mistake. Rourke glared up at him. What? You thought you were running an op? Cal leaned in, his voice a razor's edge. This wasn't an operation. This was a warning. Cal secured Rourke's sidearm and stepped back. You'll take your man. You'll leave. You'll tell Vargas to stand down. Rourke spat blood onto the dirt. You think he'll back off because of this? Cal's eyes were sharp as cold steel. He won't. That's why I'm giving him a choice. Back off, or I burn his network to the ground. And you'll be first. Rourke's jaw tightened, recognizing the truth. This wasn't a bluff. This wasn't bravado. Cal was capable. Cal was willing. Cal keyed his comms. Mason, let Keller go. He's got a story to tell. Mason's dry reply came back. On it, Cal glanced at Rourke one last time. You're dismissed. Without another word, Cal turned his back and walked away, his wolves pacing behind him, leaving Rourke to drag his wounded comrade to the one remaining vehicle. The battle was over, but the war had just begun. In the heart of the city, behind glass towers and layers of security, Marcus Vargas sat in silence, replaying the fragmented debrief he'd just extracted from Keller. The man was shaking, eyes wide, voice hollow, his account stuttering between disbelief and terror. He wasn't just defending the barn. He knew we were coming. He was already inside our heads. Keller detailed the wolves, the traps, the precision, the sniper who spared his life, the deliberate choice to let him live. Vargas leaned back, steepling his fingers. So he knew you'd come. He knew we'd escalate. He knew you'd survive to deliver this. Keller nodded stiffly. Vargas's jaw flexed. I sent professionals, and you came back broken. Rourke entered the room, limping but composed. His expression was hard, but his eyes, those betrayed grudging respect. Vargas turned to him. Your assessment. Rourke didn't sugarcoat. He's not a threat. He's a fortress. That entire property is weaponized. We were 3 steps behind the moment we crossed the tree line. Vargas's fingers drummed lightly against the polished table. You've seen hardened targets before. Not like this, Rourke admitted. This wasn't just defense. It was a design failure. He wanted us to survive. He wanted us to run. Vargas's cold grin returned. So Becker's playing the long game. Rourke's hesitation said it all. We can take him, but not with shock teams. Not with mercenaries. Vargas rose from his chair, walking to the panoramic window overlooking his empire. No, this is personal now. He paused, eyes narrowing as if calculating several moves ahead. I underestimated a farmer. He turned, fixing Rourke in place with a steady glare. Let's correct that. Rourke braced. Authorization? All of it. Vargas's voice was final. Bring the black unit. Full assets. Full spectrum. No more soft entries. This time, we burn the whole town down if we have to. Rourke hesitated. The locals won't sit still. They know Becker. They'll fight with him. Vargas shrugged, unconcerned. Then they burned too. As Rourke left to mobilize the next phase, Vargas allowed himself a single, dark smile. This time, no survivors. Back in Gray Hollow, Cal reviewed satellite intercepts Mason had pulled from a local signal relay. Syndicate communications were spiking, encrypted but traceable. Something big was coming. They're pulling in heavy assets, Mason said, sliding a tablet across the table. Looks like they're calling in their black unit. Off book. Full assault. Cal's gaze didn't waver. How long? 48 hours. Maybe less. Reed adjusted his rifle sling. We've got time to dig deeper lines. Elena, cross-checking supply caches, glanced up. We'll need the town. Volunteers, spotters, extra hands. They'll come, Cal said without hesitation. As if summoned by his confidence, the townsfolk began arriving over the next hours. Farmers, hunters, off-duty deputies. Men and women who owed Cal for favors, protection, quiet acts of defense no one had ever reported. They didn't need convincing. They came with weapons, tools, grit. Gray Hollow was not a place that forgot its defenders. Cal laid out the new battle map. This time, we stand together. Mason grinned. And we don't let them leave. Cal's voice dropped into that same surgical calm. This time, we finish it. The next 40 hours in Gray Hollow felt like the heartbeat before a storm. Cal's barn wasn't just a stronghold anymore. It was becoming the nucleus of a community defense network. The people of Gray Hollow weren't trained soldiers, but they were hunters, ranchers, off-duty sheriffs, and former servicemen who had quietly retired into the shadows of this forgotten town. They didn't hesitate when Cal called. Inside the tactical hub, Cal, Mason, Reed, and Elena worked through layered defense zones, plotting intersections between the Syndicate's likely approach vectors and the town's natural choke points. Creek beds, narrow back roads, dense forestry. This isn't just about defending the barn anymore, Cal explained to the gathered volunteers, his tone sharp and clear. We defend the town, every street, every family. We hold the line until they realize Gray Hollow is too expensive to take. A grizzled hunter named Gabe, known for tracking elk across impossible terrain, stepped forward. You give me a team, I can lace the woods with steel jaws and spike pits. Cal nodded. You've got it. Sheriff Grace Harlow assembled a volunteer roadblock unit at the southern pass, fortifying abandoned cabins to create fallback defense nodes. Mason coordinated with local radio operators to set up encrypted comms channels, bypassing the Syndicate's jammers. We'll run mesh networks, he told Cal. Short-range, low-power bursts. Hard to triangulate. Reed scouted sniper nests beyond the tree line, planning overlapping kill zones to cover every corridor. They'll bring armored trucks this time. I'll need the 50 calories set on the ridge. You'll have it, Cal confirmed. Elena stockpiled medical supplies, converted an old feed shack into a triage post, and deployed her trained wolves to deliver supply packs across the field. "They're not just for the fight," she reminded Cal. "They're for the aftermath. If we win this, we patch up every soul who stood for this town." Cal's wolves, Kane, Rhea, and Ghost, moved with uncanny awareness, syncing to the evolving defense plan. They were no longer just Cal's. They belonged to Grey Hollow now. Every move, every layer, every fallback point was built to ensure the Syndicate would pay for every step they took. By the second day, drone scouts picked up movement on the southern ridge. For armored vehicles, 3 tactical teams, heavy weapons. Mason's drone feed captured the black insignia on their gear, a unit without markings, faces covered, moving with brutal efficiency. "They brought professionals this time," Mason muttered, tightening his gloves. "Good," Cal replied. "Professionals bleed the same." He activated the town-wide comms. "All units, final positions. Phase 1 is a go. Stick to your lanes, call your shots, cover your brothers." The volunteers of Grey Hollow locked their weapons, sealed their defensive lanes, and settled into the silence that comes before a fight. Cal holstered his sidearm, strapped his suppressed SMG, and looked down at Kane, who sat patiently by his side, calm as ever. "Ready to go to work, boy?" Kane's low growl was all the answer he needed. Mason's voice buzzed in the comms. "They're rolling in." Cal's voice steadied, cold and sharp. "Then let's make sure they don't roll out." The moon hung low and heavy over Grey Hollow, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. The Syndicate's black-clad assault teams moved with lethal precision, their armored vehicles rumbling softly over gravel roads as they closed in on the town's outskirts. Tactical lights swept over the forest edges while encrypted radios hissed with clipped orders. From the sniper nests perched high on the ridges, Reed's eyes never wavered from his thermal optics. The faint outlines of enemy operators moved steadily across the darkened landscape. His voice came through the comms, calm but edged with urgency. "Contact at 300 meters, moving north along the creek bed. 3 operatives on foot, flanking left side." Cal's earpiece buzzed incessantly as Mason coordinated from the tactical hub, relaying reports from spotters stationed throughout the town. Volunteers steadied their grips, readying rifles, shotguns, and hunting bows, blending their civilian skills with military precision. "Hold your positions," Cal commanded firmly. "Do not engage until I give the order." The wolves, Kane, Rhea, and Ghost, moved silently through the underbrush, ghost-like sentinels molded by years of training and Cal's unwavering command. Their ears twitched to the faintest sound, their eyes gleamed with focused intensity. Suddenly, Mason's voice pierced the calm. "Drones confirm movement at the southeast access point. A breach team is deploying charges." Cal's finger hovered over the trigger of his suppressed SMG. "Let them come. We're ready." The quiet was shattered by a sudden boom. A controlled explosion detonated beneath a fallen log, sending splinters and earth flying in all directions. Claymores Mason had carefully planted days before had sprung to life, detonating under the Syndicate's breach team. Screams of shock and pain erupted as operatives were thrown off balance. Reed's rifle cracked twice more. 2 operatives fell before they could recover. Cal sprang into action, voice sharp and precise. "Kane, flank left and cut off retreat. Rhea, shadow their rear. Ghost, with me, neutralize any stragglers." The wolves executed the commands flawlessly. Kane appeared suddenly at the left flank, herding the disoriented mercenaries into kill zones. Rhea slipped silently behind them, her strikes surgical and efficient. Ghost weaved through shadows, disarming and incapacitating with lethal grace. The Syndicate's once methodical advance crumbled under the pressure. Panic flickered in their eyes as they realized this wasn't a quick raid, but a meticulously planned trap. From a command post nearby, Rourke shouted orders to regroup, voice tense but controlled. "Fall back to the secondary perimeter. Suppressive fire." Cal anticipated this, signaling Mason. "Detonate the eastern charges." The earth trembled again as a narrow bridge collapsed, sealing the Syndicate's retreat. Vehicles screeched to a halt, trapped, exposed, outmaneuvered. Rourke cursed under his breath. "They're boxed in. No way out." Cal closed the distance, wolves pacing beside him like shadows incarnate. "You wanted a war. Cal's voice was cold and resolute over the comms. "Welcome to Grey Hollow." The night was far from over. The battlefield had transformed into a deadly chessboard under the cloak of darkness. The Syndicate's forces, once confident and methodical, were now disoriented, trapped within the confines of Grey Hollow's layered defenses. Cal and his allies had turned the entire terrain into a weaponized maze. Every path, every shadow, a calculated risk. From his vantage point in the barn's fortified tower, Mason watched the Syndicate scramble to reorganize. His eyes tracked every movement on the drone feeds. "They're trying to set up a defensive perimeter near the creek bed. Looks like they want to hold that line." Cal nodded, muscles coiled like a spring ready to release. "Good. Let them dig in. That makes their position predictable." Reed tightened his grip on his sniper rifle from his perch on the ridge, voice low but steady. "I'm in position. The creek bed is exposed from here. Waiting on your go." Volunteers and sharpshooters in the town prepared their own stations, their faces set with determination. Elena moved swiftly among them, checking supplies, bandaging minor injuries, and steadying nerves. "Remember, we fight smart. Hold your fire until you see the whites of their eyes." Below, the wolves, Kane, Rhea, and Ghost, were deployed to patrol the perimeter, ears straining for any signs of movement beyond the Syndicate's new lines. Inside the Syndicate's hastily constructed camp, Rourke's frustration simmered beneath a veneer of control. Their assault had been ground down by a man and his wolves, by traps and tactics that tore through their advantage. Now, with dwindling supplies and mounting casualties, the urgency was palpable. Cal's voice crackled through the comms one final time before the assault. "All units, lock targets. This is the moment. We push them off our land." The first shots rang out, sharp, controlled bursts from Reed's nest. 2 Syndicate soldiers fell instantly. Mason's team unleashed coordinated suppressive fire, funneling their enemies into kill zones lined with improvised explosives. The wolves struck with surgical precision, herding the enemy into chaos, disrupting their formations and morale. Rourke ordered a desperate counterattack, but it was too little, too late. The Syndicate was bleeding, and Grey Hollow's defenders were gaining ground with every coordinated strike. Cal moved through the chaos like a ghost, methodical and calm, directing every element of his team with the experience of a battlefield commander who had seen wars both foreign and personal. As dawn began to break over the battered landscape, the Syndicate's forces were shattered, routed, broken in spirit. Grey Hollow stood. The first pale light of dawn stretched across the battered landscape of Grey Hollow, revealing the full toll of the night's brutal siege. Burnt-out vehicles, splintered trees, and scorched earth lay scattered like the remnants of a war zone. The acrid scent of smoke mixed with the damp forest air as the town exhaled the tension that had gripped it for hours. Cal moved deliberately through the field, stepping over shattered debris and spent casings. His face was calm, but lined with the gravity of a man who'd witnessed too many battles. Around him, the volunteers and townsfolk, farmers, hunters, off-duty deputies, worked tirelessly, tending to the wounded with hands that had never before held rifles, but now moved with practiced care. Mason caught up to Cal, wiping sweat and dirt from his brow. "They're done," he said, voice low but resolute. "Vargas's black unit is broken, in retreat. They're scrambling to get out before we close the net." Cal's gaze swept the horizon, alert and unrelenting. "Any prisoners?" Mason pointed toward a shallow trench near the barn. A handful of Syndicate operatives lay bound, guarded by local volunteers with rifles raised. Keller was among them, clutching his injured leg but alert. Cal approached Keller slowly, locking eyes with the mercenary. "You'll tell Vargas this isn't the end. Grey Hollow doesn't negotiate with threats. It prepares and fights back." Keller's lips twisted into a bitter smile, the pain and humiliation clear. "He'll remember you." Cal's voice was quiet, but every word struck like steel. "Good. That's the message he needs to hear." Nearby, Sheriff Grace Harlow addressed the weary crowd. "We held the line tonight. But make no mistake, this won't be the last time they come knocking. We need to stay vigilant, stay ready." Elena moved among the injured, organizing shifts to care for wounds and keep watch over the perimeter. Her experience as a combat medic shone through, her calm reassurances steadying the shaken volunteers. Reed returned to his sniper post. eyes still scanning the thinning enemy convoy retreating down the winding roads. He kept his rifle trained until the last black SUV disappeared from view. The wolves, Cain, Rhea, and Ghost, stood quietly beside Cal, their sleek forms alert and proud. Cal knelt beside Cain, running a steady hand through the wolf's fur. "We held the line," he murmured. "But the fight isn't over." As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the battered town, Gray Hollow breathed again. For now, peace had been reclaimed. But Cal's mind raced ahead, already mapping the inevitable next moves. This was a war of shadows and patience, where every victory was just a moment before the next battle. And Cal was ready. The sun rose over Gray Hollow with a somber light, revealing a town that bore the unmistakable marks of battle. The barn, once a quiet outbuilding on the edge of a small rural community, now stood as a battered fortress, a testament to the night's brutal siege and the fierce defense mounted within its walls. Cal walked slowly through the streets, eyes sharp and alert despite the weariness etched in his face. He acknowledged quiet nods and murmured thanks from neighbors who had once dismissed him as just another farmer keeping to himself. Now, those same neighbors looked to him with a new understanding, a silent respect forged in the crucible of fire and blood. The work of rebuilding had already begun. Volunteers and locals, farmers, hunters, off-duty deputies, and tradespeople moved together with purpose. Broken fences were mended, splintered boards replaced, and defensive structures reinforced. Each hammer strike was more than a repair. It was a vow that Gray Hollow would not only endure, but emerge stronger. Sheriff Grace Harlow took the lead in organizing patrols and local militia groups, weaving together the community's scattered resources into a coordinated network of defense. "We sent a message last night," she said during one of their strategy meetings in the barn's dimly lit command room. Her tone was firm, pragmatic. "But Vargas won't forget. If anything, he'll come back stronger and smarter. We have to be ready for whatever's next." Cal's gaze hardened as he nodded in agreement. "We need to widen our circle. Reach out to nearby towns, hunters, anyone willing to stand. This fight isn't just ours. It's a warning to everyone who thinks they can bully their way through these lands." Mason and Reed were already busy mapping new observation points and fallback routes, integrating the rugged landscape into a comprehensive defense plan. Mason tapped on a digital map, outlining choke points in dense woods and narrow valleys where ambushes could be set. Reed, his sniper's eye keen even in daylight, marked hidden vantage points overlooking key access roads. Elena, busy preparing medical supplies in the converted feed shack, took on the critical task of training volunteers in first aid and emergency triage. Her calm demeanor helped ease the anxieties of those who had never handled a gun or patched a wound before. "If this war drags on," she reminded them, "we'll need to rely on each other to survive." Outside, Cain, Rhea, and Ghost, the wolves who had been Cal's silent guardians, patrolled the outskirts with an alertness that never wavered. Their presence was a constant reassurance to the community, a living symbol of the bond between man and nature, predator and protector. Days turned into a rhythm of rebuilding, training, and watching. Gray Hollow transformed from a sleepy town into a bastion of resilience. Its people moved as one, a network of watchful eyes, steady hands, and unwavering spirits. Every neighbor knew their role. Every lookout post was manned. Every supply cache was maintained. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the land, Cal gathered his core team in the barn's command room. The atmosphere was heavy but determined. "We won this round," Cal said, his voice calm but resolute. "But Vargas won't stop. He'll test us again, push harder. But we've shown him something crucial, the strength of a community that fights together." The group exchanged grim but resolute looks. There was no empty bravado here, only the cold reality of survival. Cal's eyes drifted toward the darkening woods beyond the town, thoughts already racing through possible scenarios, contingencies, and strategies. Because in Gray Hollow, vigilance was the price of peace. And the wolves? They were always watching. The fragile calm that had settled over Gray Hollow was more illusion than reality. Beneath the surface of the town's rebuilding efforts, an unseen tension pulsed, a reminder that the syndicate's retreat was not defeat, but a strategic withdrawal. Cal knew this all too well. In his experience, enemies never disappeared quietly. They gathered strength in the dark, readying their next move. Inside the barn's command center, a flurry of activity unfolded. Multiple screens flickered with intercepted signals, encrypted transmissions, and satellite images that painted a troubling picture. Mason's fingers flew across the keyboard, tirelessly decrypting and mapping every scrap of intelligence. His voice was steady but carried a weight of urgency. They're regrouping faster than we anticipated. Reinforcements are coming in from multiple fronts: cities, private contractors, even black market cyber specialists. They've brought in a new tech team focused on electronic warfare and jamming. Cal's jaw clenched tightly as he absorbed the news. They're escalating. Not just brute force anymore. Now it's going to be cyber attacks, drone swarms, jammers. We'll be fighting in the physical and digital shadows. Outside, the wolves patrolled with a silent vigilance that only creatures bred for the wild could maintain. Kane's low, warning growl broke the stillness as her gaze locked onto a flicker of movement, something unnatural, a shadow slipping between the trees at the forest's edge. Cal reacted instantly, raising a hand to Mason. "Deploy the night watch teams. Double the patrols. I want eyes everywhere, at every hour." The town answered the call. Sheriff Grace Harlow took charge of the civilian defenders, intensifying training drills and communication exercises. Under her command, the townsfolk drilled rapid response protocols, practiced silent signals, and learned how to use terrain and darkness to their advantage. "This isn't just defense anymore," Grace said firmly during one briefing. "We have to take the fight to them before they can strike again. Strike fast, strike hard." Meanwhile, Reed volunteered to lead reconnaissance missions deep into hostile territory. His sniper's keen eye and stealth skills made him the perfect candidate to gather critical intelligence on enemy supply routes, reinforcements, and weaknesses. "I'll map out their movements," Reed promised Cal. "Give us the edge we need to disrupt their operations." Back at the barn, Elena's makeshift infirmary was fully stocked and ready. She organized volunteers to train in emergency triage and combat medicine, preparing for a surge in casualties that was now inevitable. "If this escalates," she warned, "we have to be ready to save lives quickly and efficiently." Cal convened his core team in the dim light of the barn's command room. His voice was steady but heavy with resolve. "We've survived the first wave, but the war is far from over. Grey Hollow is no longer a quiet town. It's a beacon, a symbol of resistance. And that makes us a target." A tense silence filled the room, everyone understanding the gravity of what lay ahead. Cal's eyes swept the faces of his team. "We need to be sharper, faster, smarter. The shadows are gathering, silent, patient, deadly. And we're the last line of defense between them and everything this town stands for." Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the promise of a storm. The night air was thick with tension and the scent of smoke as the syndicate launched their full-scale assault on Grey Hollow. This time, there were no half measures. Armored vehicles rolled down the gravel roads, drones whirred silently overhead, and cyber warfare teams set up electronic jammers to disrupt the town's communications. Mercenaries clad in black tactical gear moved with ruthless precision, their intent clear: to crush the resistance and reclaim control. But Grey Hollow was no longer a quiet backwater. It was a fortress, its defenses honed by weeks of preparation, its defenders battle-tested and united. Inside the barn's command post, Cal's eyes flicked rapidly between the tactical displays, listening intently to Mason's drone feeds and intercepted enemy chatter. His voice over the comms was steady and commanding. "Hold your fire until you see the whites of their eyes. Patience wins battles, not desperation." Mason's drones provided near real-time intel, jamming the syndicate's encrypted communications and disrupting their GPS signals. They're trying to coordinate a multi-pronged assault, but their comms are in disarray. "We've got the advantage." Reed, perched high in his sniper nest overlooking the northern approach, scanned the darkened tree line through his scope. Targets moving into kill zones. "I've got eyes on 3 officers near their command vehicle." Elena's medical post buzzed with activity, volunteers and trained medics prepared to receive casualties. "Expect heavy wounds," she warned over the comms. "We're ready." Sheriff Grace Harlow organized the local militia with precision, orchestrating defensive lines, fallback positions, and rapid response teams. Her calm voice over the radios kept nerves steady. Stick to the plan. Watch your sectors. Cover your brothers and sisters. Outside, the wolves prowled like shadows incarnate. Kane, Rhea, and Ghost moved silently among the trees, executing covert strikes on enemy patrols and supply lines. Their coordinated attacks created confusion and fear among the mercenaries, who found themselves hunted in terrain they thought they controlled. The battle unfolded in waves. Explosions erupted near the eastern ridge as improvised explosives detonated beneath armored vehicles. Gunfire echoed through the valleys as sharpshooters took down key targets, each shot calculated and lethal. Syndicate forces, despite their superior numbers and firepower, found themselves overmatched by the town's tactical brilliance and unyielding spirit. At the critical moment, Cal coordinated with Reed a precision strike on the Syndicate's command vehicle. With a whisper over the comms, Reed took the shot, a single round that pierced the vehicle's armored exterior and ignited a fiery explosion. The command and control of the mercenary force shattered instantly, plunging their assault into chaos. Sensing defeat, the remaining mercenaries scrambled to retreat into the surrounding woods. But Cal's team was relentless. The wolves and sharpshooters pursued them through dense forest and rocky ravines, picking off stragglers and cutting off escape routes. As the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of amber and rose, the battlefield quieted. Gray Hollow stood battered, its buildings scarred and its earth churned, but unbroken. The people gathered, weary but triumphant, a community forged by fire and united in survival. Cal stood atop the barn's weathered steps, eyes scanning the horizon. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. He turned to his team, voice low but resolute. This victory was hard-earned. The shadows will return, always, but so will the guardians of Gray Hollow. Stay ready, stay sharp, because peace is earned every day, and this pack never sleeps. Around him, the wolves, silent, proud, and watchful, stood as living symbols of resilience and loyalty. In Gray Hollow, the fight for freedom was a legacy passed from one dawn to the next,